Thank you, Dale, and I'm delighted to be back with you again as part of this webinar series that AECD is running in the lead up to the federal election. Very interesting days we're in at the moment, 24 hours or nearly 24 hours now post-budget, and I think the importance of this election webinar series has really come to the fore. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're all meeting today. I'm sitting on Ngunnawal land in Canberra, and I want to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and to the elders emerging. I want to acknowledge the ongoing contribution that Indigenous Australians make to the lands that we live on, and also to pay respects to Indigenous colleagues who may be with us today. I'm delighted today to be able to introduce to you Fiona May. Fiona is the CEO of Playgroups Australia. We are delighted that Playgroups Australia are a part of this webinar series. We know through a wealth of evidence of the significant role that playgroups play in the life of young Australians and in the life of Australian families. And that's why we thought that it was a perfect opportunity to hold today's webinar and to allow Fiona the opportunity to present what Playgroups Australia see are as the key things that need to be done by the next Australian government. So please listen attentively, have your questions ready. I know Fiona's excited about today's opportunity and keen to answer your questions. Thank you for being here, Fiona, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Penny. I really appreciate it and I value the opportunity to be here. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for sharing your time with me. I, too, would like to echo Penny's acknowledgement of country. We all live and work and play on Indigenous land, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I acknowledge the ongoing contribution that they make to the communities of Australia. So, who is Playgroup Australia and why indeed are we talking about the election? So Playgroup Australia is a uniquely Australian entity with an over 40-year history. Playgroup is embedded in the very fabric of Australia's family and community culture. The state and territory playgroup organisations, and there is one in every jurisdiction, are the service delivery partners for Playgroup Australia in delivering support to community playgroups and a range of supported playgroups around the country. This support is essential to the ongoing availability of quality playgroups throughout Australia. The vision of Playgroup Australia is creating a village through play. I will just mention that during the course of the presentation I might use the term caregiver, the term carer or the term parent. I'll do that quite interchangeably. Essentially I'm referring to the adults that are responsible for providing care to children and who attend playgroup. Just using that one term to encompass all of the carers who are in relationship with children. So why are we speaking up during this election? If you're not part of the early childhood space, you might not even have heard of us. Why then did AECD include Playgroup in this election webinar series? Since taking on this role 8 months ago, I've met many people who tell me their playgroup story. Almost universally, these are positive stories of making connections with other families with young children, the difference that has made and the lifelong impact that it has. I met an elderly resident of an aged care home, for instance, who told me about her experience of taking her children to playgroup decades ago and how she just assumes that all families and community can still access playgroup. Since joining playgroup, I've learned that that sense of taking playgroup for granted, of playgroup just being assumed to be vibrant in communities, is far more fragile than most people realise. Playgroups are under pressure from a range of factors, including loss of affordable venues, councils closing venues, volunteers not having time to volunteer, and parents returning to work earlier. I could go on with that list. Funding for the organisations that support playgroups is also not assured, and we don't have a strong national policy environment that articulates the place of playgroup amongst the suite of responses that should be available for families and children. So yes, we believe valuing playgroup and all it gives to communities, families and children should be an election issue, and I thank AECD for agreeing with us. So in 2016, there were 1.18 million families, which included a child aged under the age of 5, or 46% of all families. The ABS longitudinal study of Australian children and the Australian Early Development Census estimate that 35 to 40% of Australian children attend playgroup. Playgroup has been, is, and needs to continue to be a central element of the fabric of Australian society. Playgroup brings children and their caregivers to play together and support each other. It enables local connections between families, which support child development, parent-to-parent support, and community cohesion and development. Playgroup has been a fundamental building block of Australian society for more than 45 years. As a universal service, Playgroup is accessible to everyone in our community with children aged up to 5. Currently, we support over 8,000 supported and community playgroups or play events, reaching into 80% of Australian postcodes. On your slide, you'll see that it says 75%. That's because our postcodes actually include a number of postcodes which don't have a link to a geographic region. Once you take those out, it goes up to 80%. We know that postcodes are not ideal as a way of measuring reach because of that lack of connection with geographic areas. So Playgroup is a flexible model which responds to the needs of individuals and communities and ranges from play events and community playgroups through to increasingly targeted and more intensively supported playgroups for identified families who are experiencing vulnerability or disadvantage. As a universal service, Playgroup can provide a soft entry to services for families who have additional needs, including pathways into the National Disability Insurance Scheme, early childhood, early intervention systems if they require it. Community playgroups are volunteer-led and have universal access, while supported playgroups target a particular cohort of families for a particular purpose and are led by a facilitator. There are a range of models in between, with drop-in and pop-up playgroups of different sorts, which have been evolving to meet community need. There's also an increase in intensity of engagement by professionals as you move from community through the facilitated and event-based play events to the supported playgroup models. We're also aware that playgroup organisations provide important engagement for families outside of this face-to-face interaction. There's some research out of Victoria about the importance of social media engagement, for instance, and how that is valued by families who participate in playgroup. Attending playgroup provides benefits not realised in other forms of childcare and early learning. Community playgroups are often a child's first educational experience outside the home, where they learn through social play with other children and adults. Playgroups are internationally recognised as an acceptable and universal form of early childhood service provision. The benefits of playgroup fall across 3 broad domains. The first, of course, is child development, where we see social skills, emotional regulation, early learning and school readiness all being enhanced through participation in playgroup. The second is about family support, how important parent-peer interaction is, the knowledge sharing that goes on, how that playgroup participation can overcome social isolation as well as be a soft entry into the service system. And finally, community development. Playgroups help people to build social connection. They're an introduction to volunteer roles for many families who then go on to be important volunteer leaders throughout the lives of their children. They can contribute to community safety and to community cohesion. Playgroups are the perfect environment for play-based learning, development, and enforcing attachment with caregivers, developing social, emotional, and cognitive skills that are the foundations for learning. Playgroup participation contributes to the 6 domains of AECD's NEST. Attending playgroups help children to be loved and safe and have strong connections to others. It can connect their families to other supports if they're in need of some material basics. It contributes to their physical, emotional and mental health, and also to those things for their parents, and to their learning and development. For young children and their families, playgroup is an opportunity to participate in community, and the model responds perfectly to cultural needs through availability of playgroups for specific CALD or Aboriginal communities. This slide is based on Telethon Institute research, which used the last AEDC data rather than the most recent one. The research shows that greater participation in early childhood services results in lower rates of vulnerability at school entry. Playgroups promotes the use of early childhood services as well as making a difference itself. There are a range of family risk factors that are key drivers of academic school readiness, and family risk is strongly influenced by neighbourhood socioeconomic status. Supported playgroups address family risk factors and need to be available in low SES neighbourhoods. We know that academic trajectories remain stable from 4 to 5 years onwards, and it's important, therefore, to invest in the years prior to school entry. Parental engagement, we know also, has an important impact on student achievement. Playgroup promotes parental engagement in their child's learning and development, and that can be sustained through their education years. So Australian research has demonstrated that ongoing participation in playgroups has enabled vulnerable children to make up the social, emotional and learning differences that existed between them and their non-disadvantaged peers at school entry. The research into the value and benefit of playgroup is strong, but it could be stronger. We know that playgroup increases children's readiness for school. We know it improves parental outcomes, including for parents from disadvantaged families. We know it's associated with community capacity building and higher levels of community trust. And we know it results in children performing better on the AECD measures. Playgroup Australia is a supporter of building a stronger evidence base for the value of playgroup. We would love to talk to any researchers listening today about their interest in playgroup research. We have an exciting project underway which is undertaking a cost-benefit analysis of community playgroups, which we also hope to share in the coming months. And we're in the design phase of a project with the ACU to develop a declaration on playgroup, which establishes its value and the future priorities for playgroup research. If anyone listening to the webinar is interested in this project and would like to learn more, please get in touch with me. So what do playgroup participants say? I think it's always important to bring the voice of our stakeholder groups into these conversations, and we're doing that today through a very brief video in which our playgroup participants share what they value most about playgroup. We hear the voice of parents, but we also see through their actions and expressions the voice of the children themselves.
We love coming to playgroup every week. There's so many different activities for my daughter to be involved in. The activities that they provide for the kids range across all age groups.
They get to learn to do new things, and it's really good for preparing them for school.
The kids have a great time together and the mums have a bit of social time.
It's a very relaxed atmosphere for both parents and children. It's wonderful to meet with other mothers and even fathers and just talk about parenting. Most of all, I love seeing her interact with other children.
I like getting out and about in the bush.
My little boy's confidence has grown so much since coming and interacting with the children. It's lovely to see all the kids interacting.
So children's right to rest, leisure, recreation and play appropriate to their age is recognised under Article 31 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children. The same article also recognises their right to be active participants in the cultural and artistic life of their community. Article 31 provides strong support for using play-based approaches to learning in education and care settings. Children's rights to play and leisure time is sometimes threatened because there's less time for children to play because of a focus on a push-down curriculum, because of less time to play through a focus on getting ready for tests, because of a focus on commercial toys and products that may not provide open-ended play opportunity, and less time to play and explore outdoors because educators or parents are worried about safety. As adults, it's our responsibility to ensure that children can access their right to play, and Playgroup is an avenue for that for children aged under 5. We can't talk about Playgroup without talking about relationships. Playgroups are supporting children, families and communities to connect and thrive through play together. Relationships make a difference to child development, family functioning and community capacity. Relationships are the fundamental mediators of successful human adaptation. the behaviour of adults has the biggest influence on the behaviour of children. Play matters, developmentally, emotionally and socially for everyone of every age. As times change, the way we connect and play has changed, and our playgroup models are evolving to respond to that change and to local conditions and local needs. The transactional service system approach to family support can only achieve so much. Evidence from the UK that transactional units of service approach is less effective than relationships approach to family support is pretty well recognised. We know that many family support organisations are using supported playgroups as a tool in their work and as a soft entry place for families, and that they do this in part to establish relationships with clients. At their heart, playgroups are about relationship. So with that background, I'll briefly talk about our election asks. We have just 5 of them. We start by asking candidates to demonstrate that they value the contribution of playgroup to the Australian community, and we've invited all sitting parliamentarians to visit playgroups in their electorates. Ensuring good family and child outcomes requires an integrated policy and program response which values and supports the role of family as the basic unit of social capital and the role of play in achieving significant developmental outcomes for children. So Families Australia have made a call for a national policy agenda for child, family and community wellbeing, and AECD also picked this call up in their own election platform that we heard about in the last webinar. So I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on this one. But Playgroup Australia supports this call. Such a national policy agenda should go beyond child protection and give strong priority to early prevention with a focus on enhancing the wellbeing of children, families and communities experiencing the greatest vulnerability. Playgroup Australia calls for this strategy to value play as a fundamental right of all children and to adequately resource playgroup as a vital building block of child, family and community wellbeing. We know that the Child Aware Conference in May will be an important opportunity to talk about the development of this policy agenda and look forward to taking part in that. If you haven't heard about the Early Learning Everyone Benefits campaign, I encourage you to have a look at it. Early Learning Everyone Benefits is a national partnership of 25 organisations, including early childhood peak bodies, research institutions, early childhood service providers and community organisations. Its goal is to increase community understanding of the long-term benefits of early learning for children, families, communities and the nation, and to secure political commitment to increase access to quality early learning for all children from birth to the start of school. You can find out more on their website. Playgroup Australia is supporting the call by Early Learning Everyone Benefits for a whole-of-government early years strategy. Such a strategy needs to focus on the needs of families with young children, including the role of the full spectrum of playgroup models, alongside the formal early learning environments, as a universal service that should be adequately resourced and available to all Australian families. The policy will need to enshrine the importance of play-based learning, parents' understanding of child development, and the important role of parents' skill and involvement in play within the home and community settings, as well as in childhood settings. Professor Edward Mellush from Oxford said this: "In addition to early childhood education and care, the home learning environment is important in helping children develop. Where children are provided with a range of learning opportunities in the home, their cognitive, language and social development are all improved. In fact, the home learning environment can have up to twice the effect of early childhood education and care. However, in a democratic society, it is difficult to legislate for parenting, but relatively straightforward to legislate for the provision of early childhood education and care. Playgroup contributes to a home learning environment that is good for children. That we can't legislate for it doesn't mean that we shouldn't prioritise it in the programs we fund, the messages we give, and the research we do. There has at times been a disconnect between the early learning and playgroup movements. However, both have value. Playgroup Australia supports the call for 3-year-old preschool, for instance, but we recognise that alongside 15 hours of preschool, continuing to participate in play with others, including their caregivers, at playgroup also contributes to school readiness and has an important role in ensuring that parents stay connected with their role as their child's first teacher and their ongoing role alongside paid educators in their child's learning through to the age of 18. Our next two election asks are couched as specific dollar asks, but really it's about the issue rather than the amount of money. We recognise that there's a changing landscape for community playgroup, but investments of time and money in the first years of life have been shown to be far more cost effective than investments made at any other time. Community playgroups are established and led by their participants. In this age of increasing pressure on the financial and time resources of families, more needs to be done to support community playgroups, including those families who undertake volunteer roles in their local playgroup. This additional investment will target decreasing the financial barriers to community playgroup participation for families and increase the range and reach of support by state and territory playgroup organisations to community playgroup. This will ensure that they continue to be vital community building blocks across Australia. It would include funding for additional playgroup development and support officers in each state and territory organisation who can fill the gaps in regional Australia and work in partnership with other organisations in their region to develop, grow, support and sustain community playgroups. In addition, we'd like to provide financial and resource support to playgroups directly. So far, both the ALP and the Greens have released policies which refer to a new grants program for playgroups, and we welcome these announcements. The government has commenced a process of reviewing its suite of child and family programs managed by DSS. This process is likely to take some time yet and be linked to the wider policy processes I've already described. What we're saying here is that we do a good job with the funding we currently get from DSS, but we need to do more to ensure that community playgroup is sustained nationally. There are gaps in capabilities between children from socioeconomically disadvantaged families and their more advantaged peers. These appear early in a child's life, and the gaps often escalate to poorer outcomes later in life. And I can certainly reference AECD's work about poverty, the To Have and To Have Not study that they released recently. There are a range of supported playgroup models being delivered by an array of community organisations nationally, which seek to address some of these gaps. But there is no cohesive framework that overarches these, and insufficient research into the benefits of supported playgroups. The Kids in Communities study, which the Murdoch Children's Research Institute and others are involved in, has identified that being able to participate in local groups is a factor that is important for young children's outcomes. Indeed, their research found that social capital is one of the things that makes an unexpected difference in low SES areas. Poor communities that are doing well have both bonding and bridging social capital, and we know that social capital is a core outcome of playgroup participation. We see benefit in joining the dots around supported playgroups and what they achieve. Ongoing funding for the introduction of a national supported playgroup program would recognise that some vulnerable and disadvantaged families experience barriers to participating in universal community playgroups. Evidence shows that supported playgroups encourage stronger parenting skills, increased school readiness, greater levels of family support, and reduced welfare dependency. Potential target populations include mothers with postnatal depression, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, families living with disability, specific gender, age, or cultural cohorts, and targeted place-based groups. This level of funding would support around 80 to 100 new supported playgroups nationally. With careful planning, a national supported playgroup program could add significant value to other programs for children and families. We see lots of opportunity to partner with others to deliver supported playgroups alongside other evidence-based programs as a pathway to community playgroups and as a mechanism to reinforce the messages that are being delivered in other ways. What difference could be made, for instance, if supported playgroups became an addition to the AECD Right at Home nurse visits program? Intergenerational playgroups provide positive outcomes for older people in residential settings, as well as for the participating families and children. Recognising the unique needs involved in supporting frail older people, as well as young children, intergenerational playgroups would be a specific focus of the National Supported Playgroup Program. There's building evidence that intergenerational programs which bring together frail older people and children provide good outcomes for both groups, and we're keen to expand our current network of playgroups into more residential aged care facilities, retirement villages and senior centres. These might be a mix of models using both community playgroup and supported playgroups, depending on the needs of the people participating. Finally, our last election ask is a link to AECD's priorities around research and the evidence base. AECD has prepared a comprehensive election document, and many of you may have attended the Fiona Stanley Forum in Melbourne or Penny's webinar on the 20th of March. The evidence is clear that investment in early childhood leads to savings across the lifespan. We need to continue to grow our understanding of what works for children and their families. Playgroup Australia supports the calls by AECD for more and better data about children, including about playgroup, and a national survey of parenting practices and beliefs. As I mentioned earlier, we're commencing a project with ACU through Professor Susie Edwards and Dr. Karen McLean, which will seek to establish what we currently know and what we need to learn more about with regard to the value and benefits of playgroup. We'll be establishing a steering body to guide that work, and if anyone on the webinar is interested in participating, please do give me a call. You can see that in bringing together our election statement, we've taken a very deliberate strategy of seeking to amplify the calls of others. We're keen to partner, not just around the election campaign, but also more broadly, because we firmly believe that together we can make more of a difference. If you are holding an election event, please let Playgroup Australia know so that we can promote it and perhaps attend. Please share our election asks with your stakeholders. You can download a short statement from our webpage and we'll be able to click through to additional detail on each of the initiatives. We hope you can encourage candidates to visit playgroups and to demonstrate that they value playgroup as important building blocks of social capital and community capacity building. Let's work together to ensure that during this election there is a focus on children and families. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fiona. This is Paul Kinderman, the Communications Manager at AECD. I'm going to take over the next little bit, chatting with Fiona and taking your questions. So if people would like to send questions in, we'd be most grateful. You don't have to, but if you've got some questions, please send them through and we'll deal with them as best we can. But before we get to that, just some observations, I guess. Fiona, you were talking about, I guess, parent engagement. Are you aware of any studies that show, or maybe the higher percentages of parent engagement through the school years when parents actually start in playgroup? I mean, I'm not aware of any studies, and they may well exist. I just wonder if you are, and if there's any sort of correlation that we can really point to, because obviously we all know that parent engagement in learning is such a driver of outcomes at school.
Absolutely right. Look, I'm not aware of any actual studies, but interestingly, the week I got this job, and I mentioned to a friend of mine who's a primary school teacher that I had the role, she said, it's so crucial because the parents come to primary school already disengaged from their responsibility in their child's learning. And that's an unfortunate side effect, I think, of the focus that we've had on early childhood education as being the right start for children. There's an unsaid message in that, which is parents aren't good enough for getting kids ready to school, and that early learning environments are what's needed. Unfortunately, what that does is disempower parents. And that's where playgroup makes a difference, because playgroup is very much about the children and parents playing together, the parents learning more about play, noticing the difference that their play makes together with their children, and reinforcing that child development.
So yeah, basically breeds a good habit from day one by the
Absolutely.
sounds of it. And, whilst the level of engagement, type of engagement may be different once a child hits primary school or high school, the parents still, I guess, is used to watching the child, monitoring the differences in the child, talking with the child, understands just the value of play, discussion, etc.
Absolutely. And we also know that the parents who volunteer in their local playgroup often are the ones who then go on to be on the PNC or to be the coaches of the child football team or to organise the fetes and fundraisers for the school. Those parents have developed that volunteering capability and passion through their first volunteering experience with children, which was playgroup.
Fantastic. Another one, I must play my hand here. I'm a former political advisor. I don't know why any sitting politician wouldn't visit a playgroup, because it's a fantastic photo opportunity. But popping that cynical view to one side, How's it going with the getting politicians to visit sites? Are you able to gather any numbers on that, or are you getting any anecdotal feedback from your groups?
So we've had between 5 and 10 already.
Mm-hmm.
We did have a few last week during National Playgroup Week, which was exciting to see. And one of those was Paul Fletcher visiting a playgroup to announce that our Play Connect playgroups, which are a supported playgroup for children with ASD-like characteristics, would receive another 12 months of funding. So that was great that he could come out to a playgroup and do that. But we encourage all of the parliamentarians to come and visit playgroup and actually have a chance to interact with the families that live in their communities, hear what it is that those families actually think they need in their community, and see firsthand what contribution playgroups making.
Yeah, I realise that for most of them, I suspect beyond, it's just kiddies getting together and playing. It's there's a whole, as you pointed out in your presentation, there's a whole community networking aspect of this. Families who may not ordinarily, run into each other do, and then community support. For,
we would like politicians to see it not just as a kiss the baby opportunity, but actually an opportunity to engage with families.
But if it gets them in the door. So I guess the message to anyone hearing this today, or indeed watching the playback down the track, would be encourage your local member or indeed your candidate, and you can find those on the various party websites. There'll be several candidates in every electorate. It's well worth getting in their ear to see if you can get them to visit your playgroup. Great. I think you've done such a good job that we don't seem to have many questions. People are obviously, they've got enough information to go away with and chew on. I just point out, you're talking more about data, and AECD exists. Something we hear a lot in AECD, and we try and say a lot to everyone with whom we work, and government in particular, is that good policy is always preceded by good data, good information, and it's throughout our election document. And I'm really impressed that you're wanting to mine more data. And again, we've been working with the Parenting Research Centre, and part of our election ask, as it is with yours, is the parenting survey. And just looking, I was just reviewing our document while you were speaking, and the Victorian version of that showed that less than half the children aged between 0 and 5 are getting read to at home. And again, we all know the importance of that. And if we can do more to uncover the reasons behind that sort of thing, and if playgroup can play a role in sort of encouraging that, then again, there's enormous potential to drive outcomes at school.
Absolutely right.
Would you like to finish with a comment on that generally, or we can just finish there?
I guess my closing comment would be that I have been in the early childhood space for only a matter of months rather than a matter of years. My learning curve has been steep. The support I've received from others in the sector to help me on that learning curve has been tremendous. But what I've come to realise is just how fundamentally important playgroup participation can be to the lives of parents and children. And the more we can do to sustain and grow playgroup in all of its forms, then the better our communities will be for it. So thanks very much for the opportunity.
All righty, we'll wrap it up at that point. If there are any questions that have come in that we've missed, please, we can address them and get them to Fiona, and she can perhaps respond by email. I don't think there's any we've missed, but there may be some trickling in. Thank you, Fiona, very much. A great presentation, a really important area. I think people out there will be getting that. So thank you, everyone who's joined us on the webinar. For those who are listening to the playback, please enjoy the webinar. Please share it widely with your colleagues. It will be available at the end of the week in which it was broadcast. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.